Test, test, 1, 2. Hi, Facebook viewers. It's Ian here with Precision Camera Facebook Live for July 30th. And today we are going to be looking at a topic, learning about something that everybody needs to understand, for which there's a whole shortage of information seemingly, and that is lenses. We've already talked a little bit about lenses in another session in terms of zooming wide in telephoto and how that affects depth. But today the topic is fast lenses versus slow lenses. And this topic comes up very quickly when we have to address certain facets of photography, and the reason lens design is the way it is, and there's so many different lenses, has a lot to do with application. So I'm going to give you some examples today, show you a few different kinds of lenses that I will be comparing, and then explain a little bit about how lens selection works through Precision Camera. So the first example I'm going to give you relates to what are called telephoto lenses. Now these are the lenses that magnify. Think of telescope. Telephoto lenses bring things closer. And a lot of the folks I work with here in the retail store, folks who come in like yourself, maybe having purchased a camera set or kit, a lot of folks have a telephoto lens, kind of like this one, a zoom lens of some modest size and some pretty good magnification. So the lens I'm holding in my hands is specifically a 75 to 300 millimeter. And this would be, in particular, one for a Canon, but it could be one that fits any number of different kinds of camera. So in this case, it fits a Canon single lens reflex, could be digital, could even be film, and these designs go back a ways. So this 75-300 design is something that's been around for a few years. At any rate, you may have that, or you may have a whole different camera, but you may be looking through this and zooming in, and it's really impressive. It brings things in really close. And you go out and do some casual shooting, and you find the results look remarkably good all the time during the day, especially. You get sharp results, the images look clear, and you don't have any trouble with the picture quality in any way. But I've had a number of people with these work through the daytime, and they start going into some low light conditions. Some folks do some things that are pretty casual, like some candid portraits, and the more ambitious folks try to go and shoot things like sports indoors or out on the playing field at night, lit by those stadium lights. And the same lens brings things close, but the pictures suddenly look a little different. There's a noticeable difference in the clarity of the image versus daytime. Often there's a problem where the pictures come out blurry, and usually the individual in question will ask me about the settings on their camera, and once we've gone ahead and checked to make sure those are appropriate, inevitably what we end up talking about is the way the lens works. So you'll notice the front of this lens is pretty reasonable size. It's got a 58 millimeter diameter, for whatever that's worth. And that brings in a fair amount of very bright, intense light very quickly. Problem is, when you lose that light source, when that very bright, intense light is gone, to get the same amount of light into your camera takes a lot longer. So as a light delivery system, this works really well and optimum when the light source is bright and ample. But what if we don't have that kind of light? What if we're talking about those nighttime games and they're under those artificial lights? Well, now it takes 3 or 4 more times greater time to get the same brightness of exposure. To get the same picture, we need enough time that the player or the person participating in the sport moves too far and they create a blur. So no doubt, if you've been to some professional sporting events, you've looked at the sidelines and noticed some of these things sitting on the end of cameras. And probably you've wondered what these are all about. Well, the first time I picked one of these up, I looked through the camera viewfinder to try to see what it was all about, and I expected to see the craters on the moon. I thought this must be the strongest lens in the world. But you know what? This lens and this lens bring things in equally close. I know it's hard to believe, but the lens in my left hand here and the one in my right hand are no different in the amount of magnification they provide. This one's a zoom and this is a prime, but they both go to 300. And that 300 millimeters means the magnification is going to be virtually identical. So what's this all about? Why is this lens 5 times the size, 10 times the cost, and with this massive front element? Well, if you compare the front of each of these two lenses, you'll notice that the size is very different. And this is one of the greatest contributors to the reason why we need this lens. It's because when you have a bigger front element and a certain design of lens, you can deliver light into a camera much faster, okay? In fact, the difference between this and this is something on the order of 4 times more light in the same period of time. Well, so what? Why does that make any difference when I'm trying to photograph, say, a basketball game or a football game? Well, what you notice at that point is that when you shoot with this, the amount of time the camera needs to make the exposure is so short that the player can only move a very small distance, and we don't see that motion blur as often. Okay, it practically gets rid of it. So photographers who go and pursue these things tend to use these in the daytime as well, and they work great no matter whether it's day or night, but they're optimized so they can work in any lighting condition. Now, this particular lens is a 300, and they come in different ranges all the way on up to 600 millimeters or greater. But the aperture is what determines how much light we're talking about. So this is a wide aperture lens. It's 2.8 for those of you who are familiar with aperture. And this aperture goes to 5.6. So although it may not seem that much different when you look through the viewfinder, you can hardly tell. It makes an enormous difference when you're trying to capture movement and there's a scarcity of light. So suddenly this becomes very valuable to the right photographer doing the right thing. And unfortunately, when confronted with that reality, most people balk at the option to get one based on the fact that they're much more costly and, well, quite a bit more in the hand. So I can tell you, I know you can't tell from out there in Facebook land, but this thing is heavy, and it's because it's a metal barreled lens. Not all of them are, but they tend to be, because they need to make them sturdy for the folks who go and work for a living doing their photography. And among other things, it has weather seals. So this is just an example of one company's version of 2 very different kinds of lens that are both designed to be telephoto. But as you can see, very, very different in terms of the design, scale, and especially the cost. So if you're talking about shooting from pretty far away, a 300 makes a lot of sense, but they also make 70 to 200 2.8 aperture lenses. So these 2 lenses have a different range, but the same amount of light gathering power. And that's what enables somebody to shoot under those lights and still get good pictures. And this may be something that comes into play for you yourself, or you may be a sunny day photographer and you're shooting action, but you're shooting it with the advantage of daylight. And then these lenses are less significant. There's still some other advantages, but primarily what we're talking about is fast versus slow. This promotes a fast aperture when the lighting conditions are bad, and this one tends to go slow. It doesn't make it a bad lens, it doesn't make it a low quality lens, but it does make it a lot more affordable and a lot handier to carry. So I think these are great for most people's purposes, but there are certain limitations. Another example of this could be applied and noticed when we examine the difference between these short-range zooms. So these are Nikon lenses in this case, again meant to fit an SLR camera. It could be a mirrorless camera, it could be a film camera, it could be a digital camera. But this one has a range of 35 to 105. This is 24 to 70. So this lens has almost twice the range of this lens, but it's half the size. Why? Because of the aperture. So this is a 2.8 aperture, wide 24, and zoomed in up to 70. So it's a versatile lens meant for close range shooting. And the people who buy these do all kinds of different photography, but sometimes there are people like wedding photographers. They need the low light performance so they can shoot during a ceremony, but they might not be on the other side of the ceremony. They might be up close and personal. Well, even there you have to worry about a little bit of motion blur. There's certainly times when you don't. And a lot smaller lens, something that's handier and lighter and obviously more compact, can be just as practical if you have daylight or flash, or you're not interested in capturing movement. So this lens and this lens have the same low light properties, but one is meant to be used close in or for wide shots, and one is telephoto, typically for distant shots like sports and wildlife. Now, when we talk about fast lenses, you don't have to assume that that means that they're all big and very heavy and awkward to carry. There are also lenses that are compact. Now, a long time ago, before digital SLRs, and when people originally bought film SLRs, they started off with a normal lens, which we call a 50 millimeter, like this one right here. And this lens has better low light properties than all of the lenses we've looked at thus far at a tiny fraction of the size. So this tiny little 50 millimeter, believe it or not, has a 1.8 aperture as compared with the 2.8 on the zoom. What does that mean? Even better capability in low light. Well, the cost of a 50 like this is very nominal. It's obviously very small and it's extremely lightweight. These can be purchased for almost any camera. This one happens to fit a Canon, but they're available for virtually all the different mounts. And it works great as a neutral focal length, meaning you can do a lot of different things with that. You might do some people photography, some candid portraits. You might go take it on vacation. You might do some indoor low light shooting. And it's going to promote that fast exposure and the capability of also separating the background. When you use a faster aperture lens, that is one that goes wider, the background can be defocused greater and you can get more shallow depth. So that's the secondary property of having lenses like this or some of these others we're looking at, is the ability to control that to a greater extent. So why wouldn't this be a good lens for everything? Well, a 50 is really not telephoto, so if you went to a sporting event, you'd get some pretty good pictures of the entire playing field, but you wouldn't be able to see the individual players. And it would be a pretty good lens as long as you can get in the range of your subject as close or as far as you need to. But because it doesn't zoom, you have to zoom with your feet. And there's nothing wrong with that. I happen to love lenses like this, and I use them frequently. In fact, these primes come in different ranges too. You can get a very wide, a medium like this one, or a telephoto, maybe a little more appropriate for a portrait. So again, an example of a 50. This is also a 50 made for a Canon camera. In fact, this and this have exactly the same property of magnification. But looking at that front element, look at the size of that. You guessed it, one of these has better low light function than the other. So this in my hand here is a 50 f 1.2 aperture L lens. This is Canon's premier medium range prime. And this one has an even better low light property than this, and some extra refinements on the optics for optimum contrast, color, and detail. So it's not always a faster lens just because we're shooting in low light. Sometimes there's other facets to this as well. But this is a 50 and this is a 50. Again, both for the same camera, very different size, very, very different costs. What if you don't want big lenses and you're trying to do some of this on a smaller scale? Well, with the advent of certain digital designs, we've moved into the realm of miniaturizing things. And one of the companies that's done this is Olympus. They've created a system called Micro Four Thirds, and design elements of that camera series allow the lenses to be a fraction of the size. And for comparison, I'll show you the full-size Canon versus the Olympus. Okay, so these two lenses zoom the same amount, but the one in my left hand is smaller and lighter. These have the same low light properties as well, but this is super handy for people who want to travel, while this is just a little bit larger. So the Micro Four Thirds system includes a number of lens options, including this one, which is analogous to this one. So both of these zoom in equally, but the one in my left hand provides much better size proportion if you're looking for a compact design. They have the same low light capabilities, exactly though. So this is where the size becomes confusing. And with the diversity of options on the market, typically you have to choose your camera before you choose your lens. Some folks do it the other way around, and I guess that all depends on how you purchase your equipment and your intentions. Intentions make a big difference in all this. It's not just about your pocketbook or what kind of camera you own. It's about what kind of picture you're trying to make and the circumstances surrounding it. So it's all very different for each individual. Precision Camera is a retailer of some significant length. We've been around for over 35 years, and Precision Camera provides the ability for you, the customer, to enter a store and come in person and see what these things do and what they're all about. We're open 7 days a week, and I work in the sales department out here pretty much whenever I'm not doing this, helping people make decisions about things like lenses. Lately, with the circumstances being what they are, not everybody's comfortable coming in. Hey, you're out in Facebook land enjoying remote viewing. Well, we now have a virtual sales consultation option that you can look into yourself. So perhaps you want to pick something out, you need a little help, you're not really comfortable coming into the store, maybe you're pretty much out of the area. Well, tomorrow at 1 o'clock I'll be giving virtual sales consults online. And if you hop online through our website, you can log in and sit down with me and we can talk one-to-one all about your needs and exactly what it is that's going to best suit what you're doing. It could be some of the lenses we've looked at today. It could be something entirely different. But we deal with everything here at Precision Camera. So no doubt we can get to the bottom of it. The other thing I do at Precision is a whole lot of different kinds of classes. And maybe lenses are those things that you now feel like maybe I understand that a little better, but I want the whole picture on how to make better photographs. I offer manual exposure boot camp typically once a month. It is a 2-session course that teaches all about aperture, shutter speed, ISO, lenses, and how those things interplay to make different kinds of pictures of different kinds of things. So if you want to sign up, I have the August sessions available on the 22nd and 29th of the month. I'll be providing that information through an online course, and you can sign up today if you'd like to get in on that. We have spaces available, and I also do one on color and composition and design called Finding the Frame, and that one's coming up in September on the dates of the 24th and October 1st. I'll be giving information and training about how to compose a picture, how to frame a shot, how color works, and how to use design elements to your advantage, which takes a lot of the information you'd learn in a manual camera course and puts it to work creating something really creative and artistic. Lenses are very important to photography, and in my opinion, they can be even more important than the camera you use. So if you need help with those selections and you're interested in getting some helpful, knowledgeable advice, try Precision Camera. Stop by in the store during business hours or meet me online tomorrow at 1 o'clock when I'll be giving sales consults. Thanks for viewing today's Facebook Live. It's always great for you guys to tune in and everybody get a little more knowledgeable, but I will see you hopefully next time. And until then, have a safe and wonderful time with your photography.